Three. All right, LGFG audience. I'm here with Jim Peplinksi. Obviously, our Canadian fans know that James Desmond Peplinksi, former captain of the Calgary Flames, whom I will never forgive because I think it was you that scored the 1989 Game 7 goal against, was it Game 7 or Game 6 he scored against the Canucks to knock my precious and wonderful Canucks out of contention that year?
Well, Joel Otto scored it. It wasn't kicked in.
Didn't it go in off you, or did you shoot it and then it went in off him?
You know, personally, it's kind of an interesting anecdote because the guy who bobbled the puck at the blue line, Paul Reinhardt, was the best man at Castle My Wedding in 1984. Traded to Vancouver and anyway picked it up and passed it across to Joel, and he was just driving into that. It hit part of him and went in through perfectly. So that's how that ended up.
I was very sad about that because that looked like that was a pretty strong Canuck team that year.
I feel badly about it too, Dimitry. So
there you go. And as you see behind me, I actually have a Mike Vernon signed jersey behind me. I'm a bit of I play goalie, and so I have a little bit of a goalie fetish. So, and it is my true belief that Mike Vernon is the most underrated goaltender in the history of the NHL. Because for a guy that goes and wins a cup and with the Flames and then does it in Detroit again. And has career statistics actually comparable to a Grant Fuhrer or a Curtis Joseph. So when you see him say, tell him he should be in the Hall of Fame, I really believe he should be.
Well, I think he just got dissed for it again.
Boo.
Yeah, well, Lanny's the chair of the Hall of Fame, so call him.
Well, I'm just saying I like the statistical side, and I actually know the stats of goalies historically, where they relatively rank for their era. So, Jim, one of the other facts about you I learned not long ago, I actually read your profile on Wikipedia, is that you played in the, was it 88 Olympics?
Right.
Yeah, and that was the last time, a lot of people don't know this, that was the last time, that was a big, important piece of history there. That was the last time that the Soviet men's ice hockey team was the Soviet men's ice hockey team. That was the last time.
Yeah, they were a force. Yeah, stumbled.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
No, go ahead.
I stumbled into that. The Flames owners at the time were huge supporters of Hockey Canada, and it actually brought Hockey Canada from the east out to the west, and they were proponents of getting NHL players into the Olympics and pushed for every team to kick one guy in. And so it wasn't hardly 2 weeks before the Olympics started that they asked me if I would play if it would happen. I said sure, and ended up participating in 1988. It was an interesting experience. But to your point, that Soviet team with Krutov, Larionov, Makarov, Kazatonov, Fedosov, that was akin to the heydays of the Edmonton Oilers. Some of the best players that the world has ever produced, and out of a regimen that was brutally archaic and burdensome on the players. But if you just looked at the results, boy, could those guys play.
Yeah, it was like a murderer's row of players. What was it like to play against Krutov? That's just.
Well.
I'm talking before he went to the Canucks and became Vlad the Inhaler, back when he was still.
Yeah, it was the Olympics were a blur. It was one game. As I said, I think the best analogy that I could draw would be playing against the Oilers in the 80s.
Incredible.
You play against world-class teams, world-class players. It's an understatement, but it's noticeable. We played Dynamo in 1983 or 84 when Bob Johnson came in. There was a Soviet tour, and I remember cross-checking Fedosov beside the net, and my stick broke, and he just kind of looked like he looked at me not with any type of retaliation, which would be the way it would happen in the National Hockey League. It was just, I'm just going to carry on. And though that sort of an approach from an individual and from a team, to me was very foreign, because there was always retaliation in the NHL, where that stoic kind of strength is what would give you respect for the other team, instead of the physicality, the guy coming back and cross-checking you. They just skated through it, and I thought, boy, that's a better way to approach it. I think you get a lot more credibility by causing the other guy to think, wow, I did that, and he is just going to keep playing. So those were the sorts of things that I would bring up to describe Krutov or any of the others. The last year I played, Sergei Makarov had come over. And,
Rookie, the Makarov rule, right? Rookie of the year, but too old.
Yeah, and he was my roommate. And so a lot of the time they put, older guys, so to speak, with younger guys. He wasn't younger, but he was new to the league, obviously, as you mentioned. And we were in New Jersey, and I went up to the room, and he was reading this book, and I said, "Hey, Sergey, what are you reading?" His English was, my sense of all my Russian friends is they just never get around to speaking English, and so Sergey probably traveled internationally more than any Russian. He couldn't speak great English, and he said Homer, and I said, "Wow, the guy's reading." I said, "The Iliad and the Odyssey." He goes, "The Homer," and I couldn't come up with another Homer book, and I said, "So describe it," and he goes, "Ho ho ho!" I said, "Are you reading a humor book? Are you reading a joke book?" He goes, "Homer." So they weren't. The Soviets weren't that different from the rest of us, after all.
That's very interesting. This isn't a hockey call, but I'll kind of go there for a second, because when you mentioned about like cross-checking Fedosov, and then have you seen the Russian Five, the movie that came out about a year ago, that sort of chronicled, right? That team, that 88 team also had Alexei Yashin and Alexander Mogilny on it, sort of like as the new guys entering into the picture when you think about like the historical implications of that. But when Fedosov then did go to New Jersey, like the other team's strategy was overwhelmingly to just physically brutalize him because that he wasn't retaliating, right? And eventually he did develop sort of a mean streak to him that people learn, he wasn't quiet because he couldn't fight back, but boy, when he could.
Yeah, well, the first guy who did that was Boris Salming.
That's right. Yeah, he was a tough dude. My goodness.
He just played through it. And but what you understand after a while, and the sooner you understand it, the better, is the only thing bad manners understands is bad manners. And it's wonderful to be stoic and to have that internal strength. But if you're not competing with somebody who respects that, it's like taking a knife to a gunfight. And those guys took a lot of abuse that was not necessary. And
yeah.
I'm certainly not advocating violence at any level, and especially in sport. I think I've really changed my views on that after having been out of the game for 30 plus years. But he would have done a lot better if he would have taken a 10-game suspension the first time somebody touched him and broke a stick over the head, because that is the only thing that was understood in those times. I had a coach, he's a great friend now. He still lives in Calgary, Al McNeil. And when I first went, my first introduction to National Hockey League, he gave me the best advice that I think I've ever had in my life. And he said to me, "Look, Jim," he said, "this is a team of characters with not enough character." He said, "If you want to ever play in the National Hockey League, you will never get a better chance." He said, "But understand this." He said, "Sticks are cheaper than teeth." He said, "Keep the lumber up and learn to protect yourself, because if you don't, you will get run over. Understand that physical conditioning is going to become a factor, so go get yourself in shape, and you can kill two birds with one stone by joining a boxing club. Learn how to handle yourself and get the highest level of fitness possible at the same time." And I did that, and I broke a lot of sticks, but I never lost a tooth. And,
you never lost a tooth playing hockey?
I broke one half of a tooth in 1983 on Lanny McDonald's 40th goal. We were playing Colorado. I think it was the 9th or 10th or 11th goal of the game. I passed the puck across to him at the corral, and Mike Kitchen was the defenseman for Colorado. He stumbled. His stick came up, hit me on the tooth, had a mouth guard, realized that mouth guards don't do any good, got to the bench, took it out, half the tooth was there, and it's the only time I ever lost a tooth in hockey.
One thing you touched on, and this is something that's near and dear to me, is, you kind of touched on an interesting leadership principle. You said that, how did you phrase it? You said that it wasn't that, what is it? The only thing that, you didn't say nastiness. What word did you use? That you can only fight back against this with the same thing.
Oh, the only thing bad manners understands is
bad manners. Yeah. So bad manners against bad manners, and There is actually, you know, and it's like not a nice thing to think, obviously. And sometimes, you know, we have this hard time confronting like difficult thoughts because we want to find the inconvenient lie rather than, sorry, the convenient lie instead of the inconvenient truth, because the truth can be very scary to confront, you know. And I think about how bad manners understands bad manners, and I will foist that into like, you know, how we deal with this virus situation in business. Like there has to be a proactive approach. But it just reminded me of I was just listening to this really interesting interview. It was an Emmanuel Stewart interview that he had recorded before he died. He was a great boxing trainer that trained Lennox Lewis. He trained Evander Holyfield. He trained Vitaly Klitschko. You know, so his resume is probably the best resume of any boxing trainer in the history of boxing trainers. And when he was preparing Lennox Lewis for the Mike Tyson fight, he was really getting into this. He said, you know, they were discussing strategy, and you know, Lennox Lewis was sort of a defensive kind of a boxer, very tactical, and Mike just wanted to brawl. He was a real brawler, especially in that stage of his career. He was really like a puncher, you know.
Right.
And Lennox said, you know, in the first round, I'm going to go out and I'm going to go toe to toe with him. And this is Emmanuel Stewart talking. He goes, "Are you sure you want to do that against Mike Tyson, right?" And Lennox said, "Look, I'll settle into my fight when I settle into my fight. But before I do that, I'm going to earn his respect. I'm going to make sure he respects me." Now,
Right.
obviously, he had the physical capacity and the technical, you know, aptitude and everything, the mindset in order to accomplish that, you know, seemingly insurmountable task against Tyson. But in that first round, you know, Tyson jumps at him and Lennox doesn't lower his guard. And he goes right in for a massive uppercut. And it's like for the rest of the fight, Tyson's not stepping in as much, and he's saying because he knows what's coming, and he can get his, you know, his chin rattled up, you know.
Yeah.
And so I like what you said. You know, bad manners can be met with bad manners. It's an inconvenient truth. But let me ask you. So now in business, right? Like we're getting some bad manners from this virus that's coming in and kind of messing things up for everyone. And for those of you guys that don't know, Jim runs Peplinksi Leasing, which is you guys are a national car lease company. You have fleets that you know lease to corporations. All I guess I know for sure in Toronto or at least Ontario and Alberta, because we're a client of yours. Um, when this thing struck, like what proactive steps did you take in order to protect and leverage your employees and protect and leverage your client relationships?
Well, I'd like to take credit for it, but we've got a president in Toronto named Ivan Urich and a quality management team and another person who I work with here in Calgary who really oversees that file now. I wouldn't go as far as to say I'm name only on the business. I'm a capital provider, but I would say I'm more of the cheerleader and trying to look at things from an experiential perspective that I might see coming down the road due to past experiences that I've had. And so how do I get that into the business? You know, I'm still very active from a discussion perspective, but operationally, it's passed me by. I would say that the foundation of the business, as silly as it might sound, comes off of a fundamental premise of one goal, 1,000 assists. It was a friend of mine named Roy Hoffman who helped me when I first got into business and came up with this tagline. And I've always been a big believer, strangely in hockey. I got as much joy out of doing the work to get the guy the puck as I did scoring the goal. And so that was the genesis of this with respect to the fleet management business. And
Can I just repeat that, because I think a lot of people want to hear that. You got as much enjoyment in going into the corners to retrieve the pucks as you did from scoring the goals.
yeah, it's really weird. You know, I remember playing in Toronto one time with Steve Tambellini, and I was going down the left side of Maple Leaf Gardens, and I saw him going to the net, and I turned to my left and threw a backhand pass across, and it made it through right on his stick, and he had kind of an open net to shoot it in. And I remember as I looked up and saw the puck going through, I looked at him right in the eyes, and he had this surprise that I had been able to execute on this, and I just like the assist part. I like to hear Joey Mullen chirping, and with Schmully, I still think he's one of the best players who ever played the game. You just had to get it close to him. You didn't have to even put it on the stick. I hate to think what could happen if I put it on the stick all the time. And so I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed seeing other people's success and being a part of that. And I tried to take that into business. And even now, in the things that we do, when we were talking before we got started about politics, I'd love to find young people to get engaged, regardless of what their political beliefs are. If they're fundamentally solid, principled people, I'd love to see them get involved in the process. And so, in our business, I'm looking for those people who want to do it, who've got a passion for whatever the business segment is, and who've got the proven performance or high probability of proven performance and the right character attributes, and then give them the tools. So I love assists. I love to be a part of that, and I've had enough interviews on TV and crowds cheering for me and crowds booing me that I don't really care about that anymore. I would much rather see the person who's running Jim Peplinksi Leasing sit here and answer your question. But he's not here, so I can answer it. How did we go about it? The first thing we did was got proactive with our customers, and we're very fortunate. We're small. We're 4,000 vehicles across the country. We're branches in Calgary, Edmonton, Ottawa, and Toronto. But the way the business has changed, we can, and as the pandemic has shown us, we can operate remotely. Every vehicle under a 1 ton comes out of a conventional dealership, and so we understand how that process works, and we can deliver anything to you from Kitimat to St. John's, Newfoundland, doesn't matter. And our value add is figuring out how to save you time. And if you've got a rate of return on your capital greater than the effective rate of a lease, it makes sense to finance this stuff. There's also a maintenance component and just an overall administrative component, because it's, in my opinion, a pain in the goodies to go to dealerships to try to figure out whether a Ford's better than a Toyota, better than a Chrysler. I mean, I'm brand agnostic. I don't care what I drive. I don't care what you drive, as long as what you drive is what works for you. And so that's the way I look at it. We changed our model a number of years ago when we got out of the large fleet, and we said what we're interested in doing is finding the vehicle that you need, not selling you the vehicle that we have. So we reduced our model and eliminated inventory, because we can find anything anywhere, and that just makes sense to us. So what we did was we just went to customers. We've got a, as you've said, you're a friend and a customer, and we've got I would say a reasonably high level of creditworthiness in our book. And so if there's something untoward that happens like this, we would expect that the first month shouldn't be any different than the last month as respect from the perspective of people's ability to pay. And so we said, look, this is what we're delivering. We expect you to pay us, but if you can't, for reasons that we don't understand, let's talk about that and figure it out, because we're here to assist. We're here to help you through. So we've got a pretty significant segment of our business is airline limousines, and you can imagine that our friends driving vehicles from Toronto or Calgary or Vancouver or wherever, that volume is pretty much gone to zero. I looked at some numbers this morning. I think there was 2.7 million visitors through TFSA in March of last year, and this March it was 90,000. So those people are maybe don't have the same balance sheet that others. What can we do to make that work? So we got proactive in having that conversation. The second thing we did was went to our staff and said, look, it's business as usual. Just keep doing good work. And I can't promise everybody that they're going to have a job forever, but I can promise you that if you did yesterday, today, there's a pretty good chance that tomorrow we're doing the same thing. So I'm not going to say that we guarantee compensation, but we said, look, we're here, and let's look at this thing on a monthly, a 3-month cycle, and we'll start to figure out what it is. But just do good work, and your jobs are safe here. So those were the 2 things we did.
So let me ask you a question. So that's, I mean, you're approaching it very direct, like even just saying, look, I can't promise you're going to have a job at the end of this, but we're going to be here for you. We're going to ride it out like it's normal. That's obviously very transparent, very authentic. And that leads back to a conversation we had before we were recording, is like the conversation about credibility. Do you see a lot of similarity between, like, a coach, for example, coaching a hockey team and having credibility with the group of people he's supposed to be leading, versus now, like, running or being the main investor for and the cheerleader of a business where you're kind of like a coach in a way, because you're not operational, you're really at a coaching level?
Yeah, it's I think the definitions are important. Um, what used to be a general manager or used to be a coach is or used to be a trainer is just different now. And I think it's useful when you get into some of these discussions, you define what that means. Who is accountable and who's responsible, and do you have both of those characteristics at your pleasure? Uh, should you recognize that? And I think it's important to recognize that. So, in professional sport, I really think that the aura of professional sport is a dangerous thing, because people look at it from the outside and think that everybody is Bill Parcells or Belichick or somebody, or Lennox Lewis, and the reality is everybody is fallible, and we've all got a lot more uh, foibles than we care to admit to, and that we even see. And so, from my perspective, when it comes to a coach or somebody I'm working with, where I get the most comfort with them is when they start to say things like, I'm not sure about this. Here's where I've made some mistakes.
Mm.
We're going to try this. So if you'll do your best, then we'll figure out if it works. But I'm not certain. And there are things that people are certain about. But you're a voracious reader. There's lots of literature now that that would that would confirm that some of the worst mistakes are made by people who are certain with what they've done in the past, because they're putting that mindset on a problem for today, and they haven't thought about defining the problem before they come up with a solution. So, that's a broader perspective on your question that I do regularly, and my mind starts to say, am I really answering your question? Which is probably no, but I'm trying. So coaches in professional sport, how are they seen by players? Do they have to prove themselves? Absolutely. But I think for players, for members of your team, for employees, I think the real challenge is for people to have enough empathy to try to put themselves in the other person's position first. And I run into this in hockey, and did for years, where very common. Somebody doesn't get dressed, and the guy says, "Oh, the coach is an asshole. He didn't dress you." And I used to think like that, and then long before my career ended, I thought, well, hold it. If that guy should have been dressed, then somebody who was playing shouldn't have been dressed. So if you want to tell the guy who didn't dress that he should be dressed, then just make sure you go and tell the guy who dressed that he shouldn't be dressed.
Right.
Because that's what the coach has got to do. And, people get traded. Well, I can't believe the general manager didn't tell me this. He's got 30 different personalities that he's dealing with, and maybe he told you and you didn't hear him. Maybe he told you and he wasn't clear, or so have some empathy and try to figure out what the other person is thinking, is feeling. That doesn't guarantee you that it's going to come across perfect, but I think trying to do that and then bringing some clarity to the communication is important. When I get into business at a hockey, people would say, "Well, geez, why are you firing me?" And so I tell them, I say, "Well, you do this," and you know what they do? They start to cry. It's like, grown man crying. I was just used to being naked in a dressing room and somebody saying, you didn't have your man. And so typically it was, well, you didn't have your man. You used to fight about it, but guys weren't crying about it. And I thought, well, that's the quickest way to get to the end. Now I don't tell people that. It doesn't. You need to think about what is actually going to do them some good.
Mm-hmm.
And so that makes me go back to the hockey world and think, I wonder if guys were thinking, if general managers and coaches were thinking about that back then. Is it really of any use to tell, insert player's name here, that he's just going to be a goon and he's forever going to be a goon and just be a goon versus doing what Bob Johnson's did, which was Bob was maybe the most impactful coach that I had over my career. And what he tried to do is make everybody better. He tried to make Tim Hunter a better player, and Tim Hunter wanted to be a better player. And he saw that. And so, that interplay, and he did the same thing with me and with lots of others. But were coaches thinking back like that in those days? Are they even thinking like that today? I'm not sure. I don't, if you made me answer, I'd say, no, I don't think so. I think there's still, I got to win today. So go tell that guy that he's going to the minors. And I don't think that's necessarily the way to build an organization, but who might say?
Well, what's interesting, Jim, is that some of the stuff you're saying, it's like to you, it's sort of like, well, I've thought this through, but actually, it's a lot. You might not be self-aware of this and the reason is that you've just been living in such a world of personal responsibility for such a long time. But what you're saying is like profound leadership principles that you really want to that a lot of people can really learn from. You talk about. One of the things you just described was actually logotherapy by Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, and that kind of got transliterated into the Pygmalion effect, which is like the way you fly a plane is you don't set your altitude. You overshoot it, and then it sort of coasts into where you want it to be. And Viktor Frankl, in the very first TED Talk ever given, kind of said the way that you lead a person is you don't look at the person they are today. You look at the person they can become, and you lead them like that. And then what you'll notice is people will surpass their potential, and you talked about, and that's a principle in psychology and today's industrial relations that, leaders are learning about. That's a lot there. You talked about something else really interesting, which it really resonates with me, is you said, well, if you're not being dressed for this game, and for those guys that aren't hockey fans, it means you're not playing, somebody else is on the roster instead of you and you want to play, well, then you have to take somebody's position away.
Yeah.
And and one way to look at that is that fault versus responsibility. If you don't feel it's your fault that the coach isn't dressing you, and I'm not in play hockey at your level, I'm not pretending, by the way. But the point is that if your coach isn't dressing you, you might think it's not your fault, but it's still your damn responsibility.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I've thought about that a lot over the years, and I call it rationalizing. And I've always thought that anecdotally, when a goal was scored and I was on the ice, there's one of the very quick responses. It's always got kind of a comedic element to it, but I had my man. And I always thought, well, that may be, but if I went 5 seconds earlier, was I the guy who didn't dump the puck in, or if I went 10 seconds earlier? What could I have done? So I think there's always something that you can do. It's just a question of how much responsibility you want to take. And then you have to be realistic as well. You can't solve all the problems of the world. But I do think the personal responsibility is important, and how you go about reconciling that with each situation it's not easy. It's not easy, but I think if you don't start with, I wonder what I could have done there. And maybe either first or second, what is the other person thinking about? How are they approaching this? I think those are important elements to put into your head very early on. I'd also say this: I think there's a real. I don't know if you've spent any time with psychometrics. Have you?
Define. I want to say cautiously yes, but I don't want to overstate.
You know Jordan Peterson almost as well.
Of course,
He's got a very interesting couple of websites. One's called self-authoring.
Self-authoring and Discover Yourself. Yep.
And then there's a psychometric survey that is tied into that.
Oh, you're talking about the five big personality traits.
Yeah. So there's psychometrics. I mean, fundamentally, I guess it's measuring psyche somehow. It's trying to figure out how people are wired, and
right.
And so it's not a measure of character, or intelligence, or wit.
Yeah, it's like conscientiousness, openness,
But it gives you some insight, and so it's gives you some insight into how a person's wired. And I just know from knowing you that you could never be a a long-term accountant. You could take accounting with the discipline and intelligence that you have to understand the fundamentals of accounting, which are important to any organization, and say, I'm going to understand this, but then I'm going to be the guy who manages an accounting business. You could do that. And so I think the same situation falls into professional athletes and falls into people in business. The first thing you got to understand is yourself. And if you don't understand that, and then have some mechanism to reconcile it, it's really difficult. And with the world telling you can be anything you want to be,
no,
it just pushes you into a place that has you doing coffee grinders. So I think about a lot of these things, and
yep.
The big challenge I have, Dimitry, is trying to figure out how to put them into a framework that can make sense. And one of the guys who I think has done that is Ray Dalio.
Yes, principles. And actually, if you guys, for those of you guys watching, he's doing an amazing live video series on LinkedIn right now, which is very fascinating.
Yeah, he's got some really good stuff. I do think when I read Principles here a couple of years ago, I was quite angry because I thought that's the book I wanted to write, but I don't have the intelligence or the patience to do it. But I would make it shorter, so I could pull it out of the book cabinet here and show you all my notes in it. And another guy who I think has done some wonderful work in that regard is a guy named Shane Parrish.
Okay.
And he's got a book called Mental Models. His podcast is called The Knowledge Project, and he's a big fan of Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett, and Munger has talked a lot about mental models, and so Parrish has done, I think, a pretty good job in saying, here's how I think about this, and so in this particular conversation, you're going to give somebody some bad news or some good news. How are they seeing it? How are you seeing it? What's the objective? What are their skills, abilities, traits, intelligence, upbringing, all of that sort of stuff that you need to factor in order to have a conversation that generates an outcome that is positive to both of you. So, that's what I try to do with Jim Peplinksi Leasing. That's what I try to do with other businesses I'm involved with, and it seems to be working, but there's always improvements coming. Always.
Well, as is a cliche phrase now, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And a lot of times, once competitive advantage, it's not that you can't lease a car somewhere else. It's not like the product's unavailable. We all have competitors. Our company has a lot of competitors too. At the end of the day, culture is built on principle, and the leadership lid of the organization has a profound impact on the execution of the organization from top to bottom, and it's an intangible. It's one of those things that when it's there and when it's not, but purely defining it is not the easiest thing either. But
yeah. Well, there's lots of things in this world that are not definable, and I used to be very black and white, and now I almost think I've turned into a bit of a sissy pansy gray person, because there's just so many different sides to whatever an infinitely sided object is. There are just always different ways to look at it, and the amount of smart guys you can have. There's a view now that no matter who you're talking to, they don't know as the most in the world about the subject, because we can go onto this thing and type in whatever and come up with experts that know more about whatever the area you think you know the most about, or I think I know the most about. There's a gazillion people that know more about it that we haven't met. But the beauty of it is you can go into this machine, this bits and bytes, and without having to bother anybody, get most of their insights. I used to think it would be really interesting to go and have lunch with Warren Buffett. I don't have to do that anymore. I don't want to bother him. He should go walk on the beach and drink cherry coke. You don't need to talk to me. Phil Knight, I don't know if you've read Shoe Dog. But,
yeah, I have read Shoe Dog, and I just discussed it with a friend yesterday. That was, anyways, continue. It's like inspirational.
Like you read that, and I went out of Shoe Dog. I found Jeff Johnson in Lebanon, New Hampshire, and went and had dinner with him.
Wow, that's amazing.
I don't know if you remember him, but he was
Well,
employee number one.
yeah. You know, I didn't have the balls to do that. I just went out and I bought a big picture of a big picture of Phil Knight, and I put it in my office.
Well, you know, the guy that I thought, I mean, Knight was certainly the guy, but this Jeff Johnson, he's mentioned 232 times in the book, and he was employee number one. And you know, I had to go meet him in part because of psychometric stuff, and so I was in Boston.
Just remind, was he the accountant or was he the sales guy?
Oh, he was the sales guy. And
okay, because the KPMG account came very soon after.
He was living in California, and Knight moved him all around. His marriage blew up, and he's writing all these letters, and Knight's never responding to him. So I thought, what kind of a guy can work for a company for almost 25 years and just put up with this? I said, I got to ask him. So I find him and call him, and it was kind of a fun story, but we're having dinner. And I said, so tell me why. And he said, he left me alone. He said, I wasn't writing this stuff for him. I was writing it for me. He let me do whatever I want. And I thought, wow, that might sound odd, but anyway, I had a wonderful dinner with him. Delightful guy, impressive, and he went on to do other things that he wanted to do in his life. So it was kind of cool. There's just so much quality learning that's available through the internet. If you've got the discipline to sift through it and figure out where your needs and where your weaknesses and where your strengths are, there's just no reason why anybody with an internet connection now can't improve themselves.
So you know, obviously you're a lifelong learner. And by the way, you know, again, folks listening to this, there's a lot of young people in our company. They're going to listen to this, and you know, you don't have to hear it from me. You're hearing it from a Stanley Cup champ. I mean, that's pretty legitimate. That's credible.
Well, you know what? Let me just it's really interesting. I got another very good friend who was the assistant coach my first year pro in Calgary. His name's Pierre Paget, and Pierre's sole objective in life continues to be to win a Stanley Cup, and I think part of that is just because he's a driven kind of guy. But I think part of it is there's a hole in his soul where he doesn't feel complete as a member of the professional hockey establishment if he hasn't won the Stanley Cup. And you know, having won it, I look back on it and I think probably half of it is luck. And so I just don't want to put too much credit on trying to find somebody who has got to some pinnacle thinking that their advice is any better than your self-deprecating suggestion that you've never played to a level. You've played goalie, you know, you understand the elements of it. I don't think you need to luck into winning a Stanley Cup or a Super Bowl or, you know, whatever the business equivalent is to have value and truth in what you say. So I just, you know,
I get you. No, but one of the things I loved about that, what you just said underlines a really important principle in leadership. You know, for sure, there's going to be factors that are going to contribute to one's success that are not individual factors. Like that's, you know, I've been very lucky in our company to get to where we are. I mean, there's so many things that happen that, like, if I even think about the exchange rate when we started between the USD and the CAD, and if it had been what it is today, our company would have literally failed. And I'm like, just that one I have no control over this. I have no influence over this, right? Like I think about, like, there was a time one day I'll tell the story. There's a time in our business where our first manufacturer literally stole our money and ran away. And it's and I just completely foolishly stumbled into a solution that was so serendipitous. And it's almost like, I don't know if there's a God, but if there is, the God just planted it there for me, like, hey, here's your way out. And I was like, what the heck, you know? And so I get you, but there is an underlying principle there. That's super important. And Jordan Peterson touches on this. You know, it's that, sure, there was a lot of factors that year you guys won the cup. It was a sentimentally important year for Lanny, so I think he was playing a little bit above himself at that age group. You know, I think you guys had Al McInnes on that team. You know, we're just budding with power. Otto was an incredible checker. Oh my goodness, you guys had Theo Fleury coming in. I mean, that was like. And at that age, to do what he was doing, you know, playing on the wrong hand because he was, you know, injured, and he had to switch hands and relearn the game. And there were sentimental factors, you know, human factors. There was a lot of things that line up. I get it, but you still did the work to get yourself there. And so, you know, Jordan Peterson talks about it. He says, if you work really, really hard for an extremely long time, or brilliantly creative, and you put everything on the line, there is a chance that you might succeed.
Right.
But if you don't, there's no chance. So, so there's sure, the Stanley Cup itself is really kind of like a very simple token. And, people, we like little badges and all this other stuff, but don't discredit that either. Like I tell my guys, like Dimitry, am I going to make this much commission this year? I go, I don't know. But here's what you can do in order to put yourself in the position in order to be able to do it. And that's the best we can do. So, Jim, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I have one more question for you. You said something interesting about leadership before we started recording, and you don't have to repeat it. You can kind of go off on the tangent you want to go with this. But when you went into a hockey dressing room and you thought to yourself, man, that guy is a leader, what qualities or actions or attributes were you observing that to you said that this person is a leader?
They've got their own stuff together first.
Can you elaborate on that? Because that's something that I try to, in my own childish ways, I do try to sort of perpetrate that to our team and say, look, guys, before you start pointing fingers, let's look inside.
Yeah, when there's one finger pointing out, there's three pointing back. I mean, I got lots of cliches. I don't know that any of them are my own, borrowed from somebody else, and perhaps this one is too. Bob Johnson used to say, practice doesn't make perfect, perfect practice makes perfect. And so I'm a big believer in you cannot predict everything, but you can prepare for most things. And so, as it relates to hockey, for me, a huge piece of it was fitness. If somebody was fit, this goes back to Al McNeil's speech to me in 1979. If somebody's fit, they're taking the job seriously. It was funny. I was talking to Willie Platt yesterday. He was a big, toughest, meanest guys I ever played with, and delightful guy, very insightful. We were talking about views from 1980 versus our views today and how they've changed. And Willie said to me, I behaved in ways back then that I wouldn't behave now. I'm embarrassed about it. And I thought, oh, good for you, because I thought at that time, geez, why is he behaving like that? I was 19, he was 26 or something. And so back in those days, guys would do whatever they could to cheat the weigh-in. So you had somebody came up with a weight you should be in. They lost time, but they got a weigh-in, and those old scales with the things you move.
You hear that, salespeople? Finding ways to fill in stats that look good. You hear that? Okay.
Oh yeah. They take those old scales. You move the thing, and so all you'd have to do is take and put a penny or a piece of metal the same color as the metal on the top on the left-hand side, and that bought you 6 pounds. Like a quarter was worth 11 pounds, something like that, right? Or you'd creep your toes right over the edge of it. You could see always over the edge of the thing that you stood on, where, look at those toe prints down there. Well, guys would just creep their toes over and press down, and you could take 20 pounds off. It was fascinating, right? But why would you be trying?
Yeah, you're cheating yourself. I mean, who are you cheating, right?
You're getting paid to be fit, and now you're trying to game the system. I mean, it just didn't make any freaking sense. So how would I see leadership? I'd see somebody who was coming to the rink fit and ready to perform. How did I see leadership? And when I did broadcasting, Don Whitman was one of the most prepared guys in any profession I've seen. Now, he used to go into the hotel room and take out the room service menus and take all the stuff out and use those binders to put his shirt cardboards in that he had written all of his stuff on. But that was, that's the way he did it, right? But he was freaking prepared. So, I look for signs like that. I look for signs that I believe are important. And when somebody else is doing it, I go, you know what, I'm going to follow that. And if somebody's doing something different, I used to be more of a follower. I think one of my many weaknesses, I suffer fools too long. But now I look much more for what do they say versus what do they do, and so there's 100 little traits. There's no one thing. There are people who do things that I think are wrong, but that doesn't mean that they're not great leaders. And so I can learn from that too, because there's no.
Well, you said something that Coach Wooden, who's one of my favorite. I read a lot of Wooden, kind of back in the day, old schooly, and he says, character is who you are, and reputation is merely what others think of you. And when you talk about something like faking, or trying to cheat the system on a weigh-in, we see it in sales. where somebody, you know, misrepresents or misreports their stats because they want to look busy rather than being effective. We
Yeah.
see it on social media all the time, and it really actually pisses me off. As a millennial is what they call me, and it pisses me off because I see people living fake lives on social media that in no way represent who they are or the life they live. And then, you know, it creates this other problem where we start comparing our insides with other people's outsides, and their outsides aren't authentic. It's horrible.
Yeah, well, I'd be careful you don't worry about that too much. You know, I think that I often think about movies that I watch, and I say I'm never going to watch another movie, and then I go and do it again. But you know, a movie to me is similar to what you've just described, where it's a condensation of some event that is just completely unrealistic, but we don't realize that. And, you know, the social media thing, I mean, that moment in time of the guy having a glass of wine or doing something or looking buff, whatever. Yeah, at a moment in time, if you get the lights right and make your makeup right, you know, yeah, you can look like that. But, you know, when you get up in the morning and you got, you know, you go someplace where there's mirrors that you don't realize and you bend over and you think, wow, who is that?
Well,
I mean, that's the real part, right? So you just need to have enough self-awareness, and enough humility, but those things are hard, Dimitri. You know, and
sure.
I'm starting to realize that more and more, that, you know, once again on the empathy side, you know, if you don't realize where somebody's come from and what they're dealing with, you know, everybody's trying. I don't think there's very few people who are getting up in the morning thinking, how am I going to screw Dimitri? How am I going to?
Well, in my case, it might be different. There's probably a couple out there, but
Well,
you know who you are.
You know, how am I going to take advantage of my sales report?
Obviously, that's nobody goes in with that mentality, you know, and because it's not such a big leap. But you know, what I'm talking about, like the act of itself, and you know, look, I you know, I wasn't in that position, but the act in itself of like trying to overcome what is required in the sense of hard work with something else. That's you know, because you know, it starts very small. We all do it, but it starts very small.
So I agree with you. I agree
Yeah.
with you. I think you got to go then to what's the solution, and the solution is to not suffer fools. The solution is to give people a first and second chance, but you can't give a third chance. And the solution at times is to make an example of somebody that, you know what, you know, you can't be here anymore, because you know, if I looked at my life, I think one of the mistakes that I've made is giving people too many chances and wanted people to adjust to what I thought they needed to make them successful. And what I've changed to, you know, when we used to look to hire people, I used to think of all these character traits, and you write an ad that said you got to have integrity and character and all this stuff. And now my first measure is, show me what you've performed at. Show me your proven performance, or demonstrate to me that you've got a high potential of being a performer. Whatever that is, whether that's an accountant, or whether that's an astronaut, or whether it's a hockey player, I don't know. Show me that. And then we'll talk about the character traits. Because one of the problems is there are lots of people who have got very high character and they're very likable. And you know what? They don't perform.
They can't get results, yep.
They don't perform. And so those people are called philosophers or something, right? And so we need some philosophers, but they're not going to sew shirts. They're not going to sell shirts. They're not going to serve people's needs. And at the end of the day, if we can't produce, I'm not sure how I can get any self-esteem if I can't come up with some mechanism where I've done something to help somebody do something else. I had a guy the other day, I spent a lot of time on money management, and I had this, somebody tweeted this guy in Toronto whose firm hadn't done very well, and he had LOL on it. And I flipped back to the guy who sent it to me, and I said, you know, that makes me sick to my stomach. I said, somebody is relishing someone else's failure. Tell me how many jobs the guy who's writing this has created. Sure,
right.
Have him show me his portfolio performance. Tell me what he's done over, like, you know, I'm sure you've read that, The Man in the Arena.
Yeah. Well, look, at the end, I mean, you got it. At the end of the day, it's
so you know, those things are important, but when it comes down to it, you can't solve everybody's issues, and you got to figure out if somebody's going to be a performer.
really a big part of that in leadership is like, what are your results?
Yeah, well,
What are your results? Um,
have you read Measure What Matters?
yes, I have, but that was years ago. Boy, oh boy, who wrote that? That's a long time ago book.
Yeah, John Doig, I think is his
That
name.
that would have been a long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah, I know, five, seven. But that whole OKR thing, objectives and key results.
Yeah.
I think that's a really important, and that combined with Covey's 7 habits.
Yeah.
Being proactive. I think if you know what your objectives are, and so
Yep.
so when you're evaluating that, and the beauty of that, of course, is that the individual evaluates himself. I don't have to evaluate them. Bob Johnson did that in Calgary. We had 5-game segments, and he said, evaluate yourself from 1 to 3. So you had to evaluate yourself. You wrote it down on a piece of paper. He wrote it down. You could be safe and always put a 2, but that just meant that you weren't evaluating yourself, right? But as long as you're within 1 of each other, it's, we can talk about some of the specifics, but where you got a problem is if I'm saying I was a 1 and he's going, you know what, you were a 3. Okay, we got to talk about that. What do you think made you a 1? And you find very quickly that people are harder on themselves than you are. You just need to give them the mechanism to evaluate their performance against the objective that you agreed to. And that saves a lot of quarterly reviews and BS that doesn't make anybody any better. And to me, that is one of the original questions on the coaching and the sport. That is why people gravitate towards sport, because there's a score at the end of the game. You know who won and you know who lost, so you think you can evaluate that. But we can't tell in your business or in my business at the end of the day whether we won or lost. You can look at a P&L kind of, but you don't know, right?
Because you don't see you never see the full picture, yeah.
But when you get to those objectives, when you can bring it down to that level, and you can go to somebody and say, what did you do to move that ball down the field? You got a better chance.
Yeah, that's why I think this pandemic, you never actually know if you're going to win or lose. There's so many opportunities to win. It doesn't look like
you'll win. And personally on the pandemic, wash your hands and stop touching your face.
What?
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Jim, thanks so much. I could honestly probably speak with you for hours on this. This is a very fascinating topic for me. And I can tell obviously you're pretty passionate about it as well.
Well, you should write a book, and if you want to help me condense my stuff into something that's actionable,
not yet.
I need help. I need help.
You know what? I used to, when I came out of school, I was working in direct sales for 6 years in university, came out of university, and I joined a company, and I was invited basically myself into other companies to give sales training and coaching. That's what I did, like as a professional consultant. I was like 25 years old.
Yeah.
And so I would go in and I would, selling process, positive self-talk, all that kind of stuff. And I hated it. And I'll tell you why I hated it, because, like even at 25, as much as I felt I was successful for a 25-year-old, the reality is like, I never felt credible enough to be in that room, to be delivering that message to people that had just experienced a lot more wisdom, not necessarily even success in some ways, but wisdom. I just didn't feel credible. Now I see these Facebook advertisers all the time. I make fun of them. It's like, you go on Facebook and ad, I've made over 2,000 cold calls and I've hacked the selling system. And now you can learn selling funnels from me for this price. And I read it, I go, oh, what a douche. That's not, you're not, that person hasn't figured anything out. They just want to position themselves as an expert in order to take other people's money. I hate that. And so here's the thing. I would love, honestly, anybody, I would love to write a book one day. I don't have the credibility to do it yet, and should I get to, and I've set I've set boundaries for myself. I've set goals and targets, and I say, at this level, here's what I'm going to do. Sometimes they're obviously based around buying myself something pretty, because that's sort of like a actualization of an achievement. And then this goal, I have a set revenue goal that we're bringing the Red Hot Chili Peppers in to play our company annual meeting. Like I have that goal, the Lululemon guys that are in Vancouver, and Trevor Linden actually told me about it because I was delivering a suit for him a couple of days later. He's like, I just went to the Lululemon guy's house and watched the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I was like, I want that, right away. I'm like, I got to set a goal to get there. Right. There should be a book goal, and there is, but not yet, man. Give me a decade or two. Let me catch up. But the sentiment resonates.
There's one view. Don't don't overestimate yourself, but there's another two, don't underestimate. And, I would say that, and I think of the different, how old are you?
Really, you want me to answer that publicly? I'm 37.
Yeah, I'm 59, and, I often think of the different pillars of business who I've met, and you know what? I think almost all of them are pretty freaking ordinary. And I think the guys who are the unique guys, who are the people who are looking for younger people who have got the recognition that they don't have all the answers, but they've got answers that the old guy doesn't have.
Yeah.
And that's the opportunity. If you can bring those things together, I mean, this is really crass, but to some extent, the pandemic, where you start to sequester older people, it gives youth an opportunity to just take the baton, man. Figure out how to make a difference. Like there's in the old days, in the Spanish flu days, and before, when things went through, and somebody's got to pick it up. Here's your chance. And so people are talking, in particularly in Alberta, it's a dire situation here right now. And I think there's tons of opportunity. Like, let's just get with the program and get going. And it's not the same, and maybe it's going to be less, but that doesn't mean that there's still lots of really interesting, productive things you can do. So figure it out. Have you watched the City Slickers? You're too young for.
No, I didn't see it. Sorry.
Yeah, well, you should watch that. I'll send you the clip. Curly says it's just one thing, one thing. And at the end of the movie, as he's dying, the one thing is, you figure it
out. Jim, I appreciate your time very much. I'm going to close this on a 20-second story. You said that. You said something that again resonated. You said, when you show up in shape, it means you take the job seriously. That could mean a lot of things to a lot of people. That could be, showing up on time to work, something really simple, showing up prepared for a meeting, being on a company call, just those little things. For me, that resonate. I'm about to jump on a call with my friend Elon in Toronto. He's the CEO of a mortgage company up there, and I've known Elon for a very long time. He's a personal friend. We're just going to talk. It's not like a business call, Yeah. And, Jordan Peterson also says that, the sign of a true friend can tell you the truth. And about 3 years ago, I was having sushi in Toronto with Elon, and I was about 45 pounds heavier than I am today. And Elon's ordering like all sorts of vegetables, and I'm eating rice, and I'm like, oh, it's so good, and mango pudding, I love it. And Elon looks at me, he's like, dude, that's a lot of carbs you're eating. And I said, well, I want to live well, and he kind of thought about it. He's one of the smartest guys. And I know Elon Weintraub, check him out. His mortgage company's awesome. Mortgage Outlet Inc. There you go, Elon, a plug for you. He didn't ask for this. He's not going to like this. But anyways, he says, he's like, Dimitry, he's like, you're kind of a little, get kind of big, I was like 260 pounds. And, it's like, yeah, I know. He goes, how do you feel about that? I'm like, well, I'm comfortable. I'm living my best life, baby. Oh yeah, And he goes, I want you to think about something. He goes, you're the CEO of a company, right? I'm like, yep. He goes, you employ a lot of young people. I'm like, yeah, we're a very appealing option for young people, to develop their sales skill and acumen and have access to guys like Jim Peplinksi, who young people don't typically have access to, through a non-threatening product. It's like, okay, sure, why not, And he goes, well, think about it. Like, do you want to set an example for them? I'm like, well, I do. I mean, what is leadership if not an example? He goes, how many of those people that work with you want to be grossly out of shape?
Yeah.
And I said, probably very few. And he made me think, and he actually said this. He said, part of being a CEO is being in shape, because people have to look at you as an example for how they want to be. And I thought, first I was like, damn you SOB, like, how dare you? Because you're right. So there's a great story to connect with. You said, if you want to, and I cut out carbs. It's horrible. And I'm stuck at home with 3 kids, and there's so much ice cream. Like, we're our house, so there's just so much ice cream, and I can't touch it, and it sucks. But to your point, taking the job seriously. Appreciate you, guys. I'm going to share this with everybody on LinkedIn and through our network. And obviously, if you want to connect to Jim, you can always drop my name, right? And you'll take the call.
Call anytime. I'm easy to find. Keep your stick on the ice, man. Keep it going. There's lots of opportunity out there.
And keep all your teeth.